All right, you are live.
Hi, and happy National Denim Day, and welcome to our panel for our discussion for Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Sexual violence happens in every community and affects people of all genders, ages, and socioeconomic statuses. We have a diverse group of people here that are going to spend their evenings with us, and we want to highlight their roles in supporting survivors. Our goal is to shed light on what to do if you or someone you know is a survivor, and who are the people that they can receive support from. So I'd like to introduce the panel and have them share a little bit about their role and their organization. So we'll start with Denton Friends of the Family, Cassandra Berry and Deja Pink.
Good evening, everyone. And thank you, Daisy, for the opportunity to be here. And to Beth, I'm just always in a position of wanting to help increase awareness. My role at Denton County Friends of the Family is that of community educator. I've been there since 2017. I get to make presentations about the realities of domestic violence and sexual assault. And because of the higher percentage of occurrences within the African American community, I get to do targeted outreach within that community. And I work with my colleague, Elliot, to do the same, to begin the same process for our Latinx community. So thank you for the opportunity to be here, and looking forward to sharing as much information as we can in the space and time that we have.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us tonight. My name is Deja Pink, and I'm a Denton County Friends of the Family as well. And we provide free services to victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. And what my role is I'm the SAT coordinator. And so that's our survivor advocacy team. And basically what we do is we respond to calls to the hospital when someone's been sexually assaulted, and we provide emotional support, stuffed animals, change of clothing. And I also help with presentations on our community as well.
Thank you. From Abigail's Arms, Jessica Chambers.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica. I'm with Abigail's Arms, Cook County Family Crisis Center in Gainesville. My role at Abigail's Arms is the Community Advocacy Coordinator, and I am over our CAPE program, which stands for Campus Advocacy and Prevention Education. So my role is to go into these schools and work with K through 12 youth and educate them about sexual assault.
Thank you. And from the Child Advocacy Center, Cook County, Lindsey Sanders.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lindsey Sanders. I also work at Abigail's Arms. So the Child Advocacy Center is an umbrella program of Abigail's Arms. Abigail's Arms in a whole also works with domestic violence and sexual assault victims. The Child Advocacy Center in particular works with child victims of crime. It could be sexual assault, but also other crimes like physical abuse, witness to domestic violence, and things of that nature. And I am the program manager for the CAC.
Thank you. And the Graham Crisis Center, Kathy Partridge.
That's me. Hi, I'm the executive director of the Graham Crisis Center, which is in Young County, in Graham, America, as we say around here. The Graham Crisis Center is also an umbrella organization. The part that would focus on tonight would be the Harry's House, our shelter that we have. We really are not as much in the avoidance as the helping clean up after, giving someone a place to stay, safe haven, working with them, with the medical team that may be involved, working with the legal team that may be working with them. But our primary goal is just to give them a safe space to figure out where they move forward.
Thank you. And we have the Cook County Assistant DA, Erlinson.
I'm Eric Erlinson. I'm First Assistant DA in Cook County, and for the last 4 years there, my main, or not my only job, but I've been the prosecutor that's handled all of the sexual assault cases and all of the child sexual assault cases in Cook County. So I've had a lot of experience with dealing with these, with a lot of victims. We work closely with the CAC in Cook County and speaking with victims and their families, mainly children, and then also our victim assistance coordinator. I work closely with her, and I'm happy to share any information that I can.
Thank you. And the Denton County Assistant DA, Michael Dickens.
Hi, my name is Michael Dickens, and I have been lucky enough to work at the Denton County DA's office now for over 19 years. And right now I'm a prosecutor assigned to the 16th District Court, where we prosecute all felony offenses, including sexual offenses, and sexual assault offenses are included in that. While I've been at the DA's office, I've been assigned in previous years to the child abuse prosecution unit and worked very closely with the Children's Advocacy Center for Denton County. And we have a lot of victims assistance here in the DA's office in Denton that I work with, and we work with a lot of other agencies as well. Okay.
Thank you. And then we have a same nurse, Diane New. She was having some connection issues.
Yes, Diane had said her internet is really slow this evening, so hopefully she'll be able to chime in.
Yeah. But again, I just want to thank you all. As you can hear, we have a lot of different people that are here to help support survivors. So first, I want to ask, and maybe either Eric or Michael, y'all can answer. What is the legal definition of a sexual assault or a sexual offense, and what constitutes consent?
You want to start off tackling that one, Michael?
Sure, I will, but there's going to be plenty for you to talk about too here.
No worries.
So there's sexual assault and lack of consent. There really are a whole lot of things to talk about there. Generally speaking, a person commits the offense of sexual assault if they intentionally or knowingly cause the penetration of the anus, sexual organ of another person by any means, by causing the penetration of the mouth of another person by the sexual organ, by any means without that person's consent. And sorry, at times this is going to be kind of a graphic and crude discussion, but that's just kind of the way it goes with these offenses and with these statutes. They're very personal, they're very graphic. The lack of consent is found in the penal code, and there's a whole lot of ways that a person commits the offense of sexual assault without consent. And one of the ways that it's done that we think about very commonly is by use of physical force or violence. If a person engages in sex with another person without that person's consent, and the way there was a lack of consent is because they use physical force or violence against them. That's one way that sexual assault is committed, and maybe the most common way that sexual assault of an adult person is committed. And then I haven't even talked about sexual assault of children. Generally speaking, it is illegal for a person to have sex and engage in sexual contact with a child that is less than 17 years of age. And as I said, there's a whole lot of ways that a person commits sexual assault without the consent of another person. And as I said, it can be anal sex, vaginal sex, oral sex without the consent of another person. And without consent can be by way of physical force or violence. It can be by way of a threat. It can be by having sex with a person that is unconscious, with a person that is asleep, with a person, someone that is in a position where the actor or the perpetrator knows that that victim has not given consent. And like I said, there's a whole lot of different ways that sexual assault and sexual offenses are committed. And I certainly haven't covered all of them, but that's some of the more common ones. And Eric, I'm sure he can add a whole lot to that.
Maybe not a whole lot. I think one of the things too, you mentioned the ways in the sexual assault statute, because this is broken down in multiple different ways in the penal code of different ways that sexual assault can happen. There's statutes that are just for children. There's statutes that are for adults and for bigamy and all sorts of different things. But one of the ones that might apply too in this is indecent assault, and it doesn't have to necessarily be penetration, as Mr. Dickens was saying. It can also be just touching if that's not consensual. And before that, I think before 2019, this was only a Class C misdemeanor, basically. Just recently, it's been bumped up in 2019 to a Class A misdemeanor. So there's not a whole lot of force behind that in the law, but it doesn't necessarily have to be something that's penetration either. It can just be without consent if it is something that might be not as severe, but there still is punishment for that as well.
Yeah. And one thing that we didn't really talk about, either Eric or I, he kind of mentioned it a little bit, touching offenses. Indecency with a child is, it's not legally the same thing as sexual assault, but it is certainly a sexual offense, and it is against the law for someone to, with the intent to arouse or gratify their sexual desire, to touch the breast, anus, or genitals of a child, or to cause a child to do that to the adult or any other person. Again, that's a very serious felony offense. It's not necessarily sexual assault, but as I said, it's a very serious felony offense.
Yeah. Thank you. I know that there's a lot of different definitions, and there's a lot of different experiences that could happen. Deja, do you mind, could you just kind of describe a survivor's experience, and maybe, and your part with Friends of the Family and with Cassandra on, what they should do immediately, and, kind of what happens immediately after something has happened?
Yeah, sure. So most of the calls that come through to our crisis line have been reported to law enforcement. And so, of course, every case differs. Sometimes someone has just been assaulted and they're not able to get away from their abuser immediately. So it kind of depends. Someone who is over the age of 18 is able to get a SANE exam done as long as it's been within 5 days. And then children are able to get a SANE exam anytime. And so whenever someone is assaulted and they choose to make a report, the report will come through to our crisis line, and then the crisis line will dispatch a SANE nurse to start heading to the hospital. And then they will also dispatch someone from our survivor advocacy team as well. And then so the survivor is usually on their way to the hospital if they do not need immediate medical attention. Usually a law enforcement officer will escort them to the hospital, or they can choose to ride by themselves. And then we head to the hospital, we check in, and then when we get there, we kind of introduce ourselves and who we are and what we do, and we ask permission if they are okay with us coming in the room, where they would like us to sit. We try to offer choices in any way that we can, because of course, all of their choices have just been taken from them. So at Friends of the Family, we like to just make sure we're offering choices. Would you like me to come in? Is it okay if I have a seat? Where would you like me to sit? Are you okay with going over these resources? And so we're just making sure that we're providing that emotional support for them. We provide resources as well. We offer a teddy bear, because even if someone's older, you may not think that they would like a teddy bear, but sometimes people like just something soft and fuzzy to hold on to. And then we're just there with them. Very rarely is an advocate declined. Most times people do just want someone to be there with them. And so we're there to be there with them through the whole process. We can even go in the exam with them if they would like. And then afterwards, after the exam is done, we will follow up with them 2 days later, and we will ask them if they are interested in any of the many services that we offer at Friends of the Family. And so that's pretty much a survivor's experience through our programs. And then if they're interested in our services, we have so many that they're able to choose from. Most of the times it's counseling that people are interested in. And so, Cassandra, I don't know if you have anything to add, but that's pretty much the bulk of it, what we do after as sexual assault report comes in?
Yeah, it's a comprehensive set of services, because when we talk about what our mission statement is to provide comprehensive and compassionate services, we want to make sure that person has a space and place to be able to, have support there available to them if that's what they are wanting. We want to encourage them that they do not have to incur the expense of the medical exam and that medical visit through completion of the crime victims compensation form, because it is available to them, and because it doesn't make sense for them to have to pay for being treated for the abuse that they have received. As Deja said, we follow up with them, and like we said, the choices have been taken away from them. So we just offer these services to them for them to accept or deny. And with regard to COVID, we of course had to pivot as so many other agencies, and so our interaction with the client or with the victim has been electronically, that Deja set up. And so we're looking forward to going back into the hospitals and having that direct contact with the victims.
Kathy, do you have anything you would like to add as far as an essential survivor's experience in Graham?
I would say very much like Deja, we tend to be contacted by the police after an incident. Typically for us, it's when they know they don't want to go back home or it's not safe to. And so much like that, we meet them at the hospital, we help cover their expenses. We don't do a lot here with victims' benefits. We kind of are that checkbook. I'll say we help cover those costs and then get them to shelter in a safe space. And then, of course, that's just the beginning.
Right.
From there on. So,
thank you all. So you mentioned a SANE exam. Diane, can you kind of go through what is a SANE exam? What does that mean?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, and then I dropped my headphone out of my ear. So a SANE exam, there I got it. A SANE exam begins either when the advocate calls us to tell us to come in. We do a complete head to toe assessment, looking at everything and paying particular attention to the history that the client has given us. If they say, maybe I'm going to be a little graphic, they kissed me on the lips, we'll make sure and do swab areas there. But there's a lot of things before we get started on that. We want to build a rapport with the client. We here in Cook County take the client out of the room of the ER and take them to a different room that's quiet and away from everyone. Typically, our advocates don't go in. I know Grayson also allows their advocates to go in, but typically in Cook County, we don't. And I don't know, there's good and bad to that too. I'm not sure. And one of the things that I'm real big on is not talking to the police or to the advocate to get a history ahead of time from them, because I don't want to be swayed either way. I want to hear the story fresh from the client and without anything else. A lot of times it's maybe the third time that they're telling this. They told the officer that came on scene, then maybe they had to tell the detective, then maybe had to tell the ER doctor a little bit. So we just go to a completely different place and begin there. We begin, like I said, with the head to toe assessment. There's cameras and monitors and all kinds of things in there. And of course, we get them to sign consents. And then we move them out of that room and go towards into our exam room and then do the head to toe exam. And I can get as in-depth as you want on that, or as not as an in-depth as you want on that. So did that answer the question?
Yes, it did. And can you explain maybe a little bit of a difference between for like if a child was a child or under 18, what would be the difference in that kind of SANE exam as far as who is allowed there?
If the child is old enough, obviously we ask that we can take the child with us. We need to know who the legal guardian is first, whether it be the police officer, whether it be CPS, whether it be the adult that brought them in. We don't always just take the mom or dad's word that they're the ones that can give consent. We never know what the history is behind all of that. So we want to make sure we get a good legal guardian. Another big difference is based on the age of the client, especially if it's a female. I don't want anybody to think that we do a complete internal exam on children. We don't. There's a starting point. Once a girl has gone through menses, then we will start doing an internal exam on them. But prior to that, we don't. We just look and take swabs. We also, the one thing that is real big is that children typically don't know the right words for our body parts. So we do an extra sheet of paper where we say, what do you call? And I point to the hand and they'll say hand. What do you call your arm? And they'll say arm, and I write arm. Then I say, what do you call your feet? And they say tootsies or something like that. So we write down what the child calls it, so that the DA's office knows when I write down client said right tootsie has a bruise on it, and that's where they hit me. They'll know exactly what I'm talking about there. So there's a little bit more extra paperwork. Of course, we still have the consents and everything like that. I might start at the bottom instead of the top and go from the bottom back up to the top to gain a little bit more rapport with the client. So I'm not starting at the top and being right in their face at first. I want to build some more rapport with the clients. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
That's really important. Yeah.
Yeah. What if you're a survivor of an assault that's already happened? What kind of help do you have? I think Abigail's Arms might be a good option. I'm sure everyone has a lot of great resources, but we can start there.
Can you repeat the question one more time? I'm sorry.
What kind of help do you have for a survivor of an assault that's already happened, like in the past?
Yeah, so for adults, we do have a shelter here in Gainesville. So if they're escaping their sexual abuser, they can do an intake for residential services where they'll get intensive case management that will include like goal setting. It includes getting housing stability, job stability. There's healthy relationships classes. If they're a parent, they have access to parenting classes. And we also bring in a financial advisor if they're like in debt or if they don't have their own bank accounts or something like that, just to make sure that they have access to services if they were limited while they were being sexually abused. Those are most often like chronic domestic violence sexual abuse. We also work some with taking human trafficking victims here in our shelter. So that could be human trafficking victims that were taken out of a different shelter, maybe in Denton or Dallas, and they're trying to move them somewhere else and they stay with us for a little bit. Or if their security has been breached somewhere else, that they can come up to Cook County because we're a little bit smaller and less like well known. And then we also do non-residential services, so that mirrors residential services without the finding a housing piece. Those ladies still are helping with job security, with healthy relationships, with monetary security. A lot of the times they're helping get legal status too for those victims of sexual abuse that don't have their legal status yet. We also do work with CVC compensation, not only with our adult victims, but with our child victims as well. And then we also work with getting mental health servicing for those victims.
Thank you. And friends of the family, what I'm sure you have. Do you have other services that are that you provide for previous survivors?
Yes, we provide counseling. Even if it hasn't something that just immediately happened, if someone is experiencing triggers from previous trauma or has an adverse impact on their current relationship, and they feel that there's still some unresolved things for them that's impacting them moving forward, we provide that to them. And so um, we do group as well as individual counseling if it's a situation for which they may fear having another traumatic experience. We help them with safety planning as well. Of course, we have a 24/7 shelter if they're in imminent danger. And so sometimes when I'm talking to people, and Deja can jump in as well, they may say, well, I'm having experiencing some, you know, trauma and being triggered by some things, even though this, happened, a while back. And so we let them know that we're still available for them to tap into the services to help them through that. Anything you want to add to that, Deja?
Yes. One thing I always like to kind of emphasize with survivors is that we don't want anything from you. They may have had to tell their story plenty of times already, whether or not they made a report, and then they're just seeking help from friends of the family. I just try to make it clear through my actions and how I work with them that we don't want anything from you. We're not investigators. We're just there to simply support and provide services if they are willing and able. So yeah, in addition to what Ms. Cassandra said already, we also offer legal advocacy as well. And then just a general advocacy, which is a crucial part in the process because they can help with a lot of different things as far as just someone simply needing help with paperwork, if they need help with their crime victims compensation, which a lot of survivors don't even know exists until they are connected with the Rape Crisis Center. Just letting them know what's available out there to them, I think is very, very helpful because they wouldn't know otherwise. So I think that's very important.
Yeah, that is all very important. And thank you all for all of those different resources that we have. What legal options does someone have for a past sexual assault, like a statute of limitations, kind of the legal in terms of legal terms?
Eric, I went first last time.
Yeah, I think I need to go first. I can do that. So I think, really that's what most of the cases, or not most, I'd say a lot of the cases that we have, especially involving children, are cases that whether sometimes the child didn't make an outcry at all when it happened, sometimes they made an outcry and law enforcement didn't follow up the right way, or later on the family member that they made the outcry to finally decided to tell somebody, or for whatever reason, sometimes this happens. So I think that's a really common experience for us in dealing with this, I think. And the real answer is if it's a child, any kid 17 years of age or younger, there is no statute of limitations anymore. So there isn't going to be a problem with the statute of limitations with a child. Now, for an adult, there's a 10-year statute of limitations with a few exceptions. Like if there's DNA that hasn't been matched with somebody, there's not going to be a statute of limitations on that DNA. If they did find DNA, but they didn't find a match. So that's another case. There's no statute of limitations there, but really the real answer is it might make the case a little more difficult, but there's no reason that those cases don't get prosecuted and that we go forward with them all of the time. I mean, like I said, in my experience in Cook County, at least, and Michael can speak to Denton, but I think many of the cases that we have are cases that are years old or sometimes even 10 years old. It's not uncommon for us to see something that's a fairly old case.
Yeah, I would agree with Derek. In the legal community, we refer to it as a delayed outcry when a child does not report the abuse right away. And delayed outcry is very, very common in sexual offenses involving children. And it's easy to see why so many of the perpetrators of sexual offenses against children are either relatives or close friends of the family, that's a very high percentage of the perpetrators. And those are some of the people that a child might have the greatest fear of disclosing abuse about. It's very hard to talk about that when it's anyone, but could you imagine talking about your father being the perpetrator, your grandfather being the perpetrator, your uncle being the perpetrator, your next door neighbor that your family is best friends with? So it's easy to see why delayed outcry is so common. And over the last 20 years or so, the statute of limitations has changed quite a bit in regards to sexual offenses. And so nowadays, an offense is going to have to be very, very old for there to be no prosecutable offense, assuming that an offense of sexual assault, indecency with a child, or aggravated sexual assault occurred. So I would encourage any victim that has had that happen to them, no matter how long ago it was, to let the police know, make that report. And some people may wonder and may worry, well, it's going to just be my word against that perpetrator's word. Well, if that's the case, then so be it. We'll deal with it, and we'll handle that case accordingly. But it may be that there is other evidence that that child does not know about, that victim does not know about. There may be other victims out there that person making that outcry that inspires them to come forward too. And then finally, as far as a statute of limitations goes and a victim worrying, well, this happened so long ago, I don't think that there's anything that can be done about it legally or otherwise. I would just encourage that person to report that to the police and let the police and the prosecuting attorney's office figure out whether or not there really is a problem with the statute of limitations. Those are my biggest points. Eric, did I leave anything out, Eric?
No, I think I was going to hit on that that we see that a lot too, that victims think that, well, it's just my word, especially children, and they even if they're making the outcry years later when they're an adult, maybe they still have this mindset that, well, I'm just a child, or I'm one person, nobody's going to believe me. But I think most of the cases that we have, that's, sometimes there's some other little piece that might help, but a lot of times that might be all you have. And that is enough. That's enough if you let, like Michael said, if you let law enforcement get involved, and they can help corroborate different things of that story that a child might not think about, or a sexual assault victim might not think about, that can help make the case stronger. So I think that is an important point. One person's word is actually enough to get a conviction on a case like this.
And I've just seen situations where that one person comes forward and then the other people come forward after that. And it wasn't just that one victim. And sometimes it doesn't happen that way, but plenty of times it does. And that can be very, very powerful evidence in court when there are multiple child victims or even adult victims that indicate what happened to them. And I think so many times the victim feels like they're alone, and I don't think they're not. They may feel that way, but I really don't think that they are. And when they come forward, then the help from the police, the Advocacy Center, the Friends of the Family, the Texas Attorney General Crime Victims Compensation Fund, it can all be a service to them.
And that isolation is real big. Some of the others on the panel might be wanting to speak to the therapeutic side of what happens when a survivor, especially having experienced a childhood trauma, gets to release that and share their story, even if they don't report it to the police. If they come to our agency or any of the other agencies for counseling and just to be able to share. I've had several survivors to share their experience by telling their story or participating in some of the awareness events that we've had. And then I do a follow-up with them to ask, well, what was that like? And, where are you today? And to hear how it was, for lack of a better word, on top of my head, because it's so late in the evening for me. I started early this morning. I guess freeing, was helpful for them. Some have gone on to, publish their stories, short stories, write a book. Some have resumed doing art. I had an artist to present a piece where she said the representation of it was because it was part black and white and part color. And she said that after she was raped, that she lost sight of color. And so as she began to share her story and her experiences, the vision of color came back to her. And that was what was that painting represented for her. And so, not only the aspect of going to the police, but talking with someone, sharing that and owning that story and releasing themselves of any, guilt or shame that may, been part of what they're holding on to. And so the therapeutic aspect, I think, is important as well, if anyone else wants to speak to that.
I know I can attest to that with the Child Advocacy Center. I've seen quite a few kids go through the trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapies. And, a lot of times people look at children who have been sexually abused and they want to say they're traumatized, obviously, but it's almost like there's a weakness associated with them at that point. But I've seen when they go through therapy and they're able to process through what's happened to them and they're able to own what's happened to them. We've had some kids be able to get up on the stand and they're very confident in what's happened to them and they're able to sit there and say, this is what happened to me. It shouldn't have happened to me. And so I'm very thankful to organizations like ours that allow these victims to, even if they don't go to court, they're allowed in those spaces to share their experience and process through those things.
Those are powerful. Thank you for sharing those little lights at the end of the tunnel. The Victims Compensation Fund has been mentioned. And can someone kind of explain that, if there's like limitations or requirements or how that works?
Who wants to take that one?
Anyway, I'm not sure who's the best to answer.
I'll speak a little bit on it. I know I usually see it from the children's cases perspective, but there are certain things that they will cover. I know off the top of my head, and again, just like Cassandra said, it's late, so bear with me. But I know that they will cover relocation cost. They will cover counseling if needed. They will cover crime scene cleanup and funeral cost sometimes. And oh, guys, help me out. My brain is going.
I think they'll cover medical expenses too. I don't know if you've said that.
The SANE exam, yeah.
Time off for missing work is covered.
Yeah, for parents if they've had to take like extraneous time off, or I know for some cases, we get some cases that are out of county in rural areas, and if the families had to drive over a certain mileage to get to like their forensic interview or their SANE exam, they'll reimburse them for mileage for that. A big thing with CVC, aside from the SANE examination, a lot of those costs are reimbursed cost. But we have seen with the like relocation and the SANE exam, especially for relocation, there is sometimes where either like counselors or landlords or those people, they can choose to accept direct payments from the Attorney General's office. So that has to be worked out on an individual basis with either that counselor or the landlord, but sometimes it can be worked out where it doesn't have to be a reimbursement if there's an agreement between both parties.
Someone may have already mentioned it. I'm sorry, someone may have already mentioned the Crime Victim Compensation Fund covering counseling costs. One thing that I talk to victims on the phone about all the time is the importance of filling out and submitting that that victim impact packet that is sent to the DA, sent to them by the DA's office, and police departments send those out as well, and probably other agencies too. But it's very important that a victim fill out that victim impact packet, send it in, and that their application be made to the Crime Victim Compensation Fund, because one thing, as I've always understood, that they cover are counseling costs, and not just counseling costs today or tomorrow, but maybe months or years down the road when this is not necessarily truly over with, but when services may be needed, and we're a long ways away, and that Crime Victim Compensation Fund can still be there for them.
Yes, and another thing to note about CVC, and we try to make clear to the people that we work with at Friends of the Family, is we don't ever promise that CVC is going to cover everything. It's usually used as like a last resort. So after insurance has kicked in, and basically all other resources have been exhausted, and then CVC can possibly cover the cost. And it has to be a direct result of the crime. So if they won't cover things like damages or repairs, like to a vehicle or property, or pain or suffering, emotional distress. So it has to be something that was a direct result of the crime. And we just make sure that they're aware that still put in the packet, still do the application, but we don't ever guarantee that CVC will cover something. But it is a great resource though.
Yeah. Thank you all for sharing all of that about that resource. And as we've kind of touched on the impact going beyond, an individual survivor. What sort of support do your organizations have for some family members of survivors? Because it's, that they are going to have some processing and things to go through. So is there support for family members of survivors?
Yes, so at Friends of the Family, all of our services are for primary victims and secondary victims. So a primary victim is someone who was on the direct receiving end of the violence, and then the secondary victim could be like a family member or a coworker or a friend, anyone basically in the survivor's life who was also impacted by the violence. And so all of our services are free to primary and secondary victims. So that would be the counseling, shelter. We also have a transitional housing program as well. So when someone's transitioning from our shelter into like their own apartment, we have additional resources for that. And of course, case management and play therapy for kids, because kids are most times the secondary victim of an assault or domestic violence. So we have play therapy and childcare and things like that. If like mom needs to go to counseling, and then we also have a battering intervention and prevention program. So maybe someone in the family was an abuser, and they're told by the court that they have to go to the BIP program. That is a 30-week program that kind of addresses abusive behaviors and provides accountability. And so all of our services are for both primary and secondary victims.
Yeah, especially if there's an end of life for a victim, we want to make sure the family knows that, counseling is available to them. We've seen that, and we've provided that service to those secondary victims. And you really encourage the counseling for children, because research shows that the impact of trauma can have an adverse impact on a child as early as 6 months old, especially when it happens in the home. Our counseling program for children, the services we provide start at age 3, but just to be able to provide that and start addressing any aggressive microaggression behavior from the children, we encourage it. Again, we don't force anything upon anyone because it's their choice, but we give them the best information available for them to make the best decisions for themselves and or their families. And you talk about the advantages to counseling following the trauma.
I know at the Child Advocacy Center in specific, we have a role called Family Advocate. So we truly do look at these clients not individually, but as the unit they come in as. It could be the child and the non-offending caregiver, it could be the child and the current guardian. But we really try to address the trauma as holistically as possible because it does truly affect every person in that child's life. We're a little bit different in the child for us is the primary client, and then the parents are usually the secondaries for us. But the support that we're giving to these parents or guardians is just educating them on what to expect during all of this. You know, when clients enter into the system with us, they don't understand everything that's going on. They don't understand all the legal jargon. They don't understand everything that DFPS is doing and law enforcement. It's very confusing. So our family advocates are there to like stand beside them and clarify things as they go along, um, offer them information and clarification as things come up and as support. Our family advocates also work in normalizing what's happening because when our parents or guardians come in, they feel very isolated or they feel like nobody understands what they're going through or that how they're feeling isn't right. So our family advocates are also there to educate them on what are some like symptoms that you might see from your child after they have come into our services, or what kind of behavioral concerns can you expect, or what does it mean when your case is going to grand jury, and clarifying what all of that is. So we really want to provide that support to those parents because if those parents feel supported, they can support the child better, and that makes the cases and the child's healing process a lot better.
And we always want to emphasize to the survivor and to secondary victims that it is not the victim's fault. There have been situations where a question might come up, maybe just the way in a person's upbringing. Well, I told her if she hadn't worn this, or I told her to stop going to these places, and this would not have happened. No, it happened because the person made a choice to sexually assault the victim, and that the ownership and accountability of what happened is on the abuser and not the victim. And so it really helps for them to understand and remove any ownership of what happened off of the victim, and put it where it is rightly applied, and that is to the abuser. So we always want to emphasize to the clients and to their secondary supporters that it is not the victim's fault.
Thank you. That was really the support that you're giving is very valuable. Kathy, do you have anything you would like to add as far as family support for victims that the Crisis Center offers?
Nothing different at all. We very
Okay.
much shadow what everyone else is doing. So, and I
Excellent.
applaud everyone out there and everything that's going on, right?
So I kind of want to shift a little bit more to awareness. And what are some things that are done for more awareness for sexual assault prevention? Jessica, I think you mentioned that's kind of where your area is in providing awareness. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so at Abigail's Arms, we do like some awareness events for Sexual Assault Awareness Month, like Denim Day and Teal Day, but we really focus heavily on prevention, and that is my passion. So we go into the schools and we talk to the youth or educate them about those risk factors that can lead to sexual violence. So male entitlement, a man thinking that just because she's wearing what she's wearing that I have the right to go and touch her, or in the same thing with objectifying her. She's objectifying women because she's wearing a short dress. That means that I can catcall her. What else? Unhealthy attitudes about sex and sexuality, which also plays into that. And so we talk to them about all these risk factors and then educate them about the protective factors. So gender equality, connectedness, empathy, and how they can play a role in stopping sexual violence. So we do that through discussions, through group activities, through videos, and we also talk a lot about consent. And we use the FRIES model from Planned Parenthood. So the FRIES model is consent should be freely given, it should be reversible, it should be informed, it should be enthusiastic, and it should be specific. And so we tell our youth, you know, if someone's asking you something that you are uncomfortable with, run through that FRIES model and think about that when you want to give consent to something. And we let them know that consent, it doesn't apply to just sex, right? Consent applies to everything that you do every day. It could be as simple as asking your parent to go to a party or asking your friend to borrow their phone. So we make sure to educate them that you should practice consent every day because that will help you once you start making those decisions about engaging in sex with someone.
Is this like a program that you take into schools, or is it a volunteer?
Yes, so we have a prevention team, and we go mainly in middle school and high schools, working with youth. And so we utilize different curriculums. One of the curriculums that we use a lot is TASA, which TASA is the Texas Association Against Sexual Assault. They have an amazing curriculum called Building Healthy Relationships and Communities that we use. And next semester or next school year, we'll be implementing Safe Dates, which is a evidence-based sexual assault curriculum for middle schoolers and high schoolers. And I'm super excited about that.
Wow. Yeah, that is, that's huge. That's really exciting.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have anything else to add on prevention?
Go ahead, Deja.
I was gonna say, we do pretty much similar things as Abigail's Arms. Our programs are pretty similar. We're very heavy in schools because you know, the behaviors and the things that people learn, especially as they get older, the things that they do when they're older came from things they learned when they're younger, of course. And so if we can get to the kids as soon as we can, we will. We teach them about healthy relationships. We teach them about boundaries. I think boundaries are so important because sometimes people feel like they don't deserve to have boundaries, or, you know, I'm young, so I should do what people tell me to do. But that's not the case. Everyone has boundaries. We teach them about consent as well. And so we have different programs. Like we have this program called Bumbles where we use for pre-K, and then we have a program called Who, and we use like stuffed animals. We get dressed in a bee costume, like whatever we have to do to get the message out to the kiddos. And then of course, as they get older, we can talk more in depth and use deeper language with them. And so we do all ages from age 3 up until whenever. We always say we'll go wherever someone requests us. So we do a lot of traveling. Of course, with us being virtual, we're able to reach more people, which is great. And so every year, I think we're able to reach thousands and thousands of people. I think in 2019, we presented to over like 18,000 people in Denton County. And so we have a whole prevention team as well that Cassandra and I are on. And so we do a lot of professional trainings, schools, and then colleges. So we're trying to expand more to professional training as well. We're heavy in churches. That's what Ms. Cassandra does as well, like working with churches, making them more aware of domestic violence and sexual assault and what to do. And so prevention is very, very important. We believe that we save so many lives, people that we can't even see or meet because of the prevention work that we do. So we think that is very important.
Yeah, and go into the schools, into the communities. We developed some programs, like a couple of ones that I developed under my program of Our Community Matters. Um, we had our 4th annual Black History Month program in February entitled An Evening of Raised Awareness, because of healing can happen through the arts. In October, of course, we didn't have it this past October. We have a Domestic Violence Awareness Month where persons can, we have some survivor to share their story. We give out information about domestic violence awareness, and um, allow for organizations. We've had the UNT and TWU and others to do some type of art form, be it painting, dancing, and what have you. Just early part of this month, we kicked off Sexual Assault Awareness Month with one of our community conversations that we started offering during this pandemic, talking about the realities of sexual assault within the African American community. And the one we had on the 15th was the Men's Project, and we had that program to talk about assault against men. Of course, today is National Denim Day, and the story behind that. If I botched it up, y'all jump in and help me. Around 1998, in the Italian Parliament, ruling was overturned about. The judge said that the woman had to have helped the man rape her because her jeans were too tight for him to have gotten off by herself. And so the next day, the women said, we're not going for this. And so they all showed up in their denim in support of that. And so that's been happening since 1990. I think 1998. I tell you, help me if I'm
That's
missing something.
correct.
Yeah. So this to dash. So we've been posting things throughout this month. We've had what we call hashtag Teal Tuesdays. We created flyers that give statistics about 70% of sexual assaults are committed by a perpetrator known or related to the victim. Every 73 seconds, someone in America is sexually assaulted. 63,000 children from 2009 to 2013, Child Protective Services agencies substantiated or found strong evidence to indicate that 63,000 children a year were victims of sexual abuse. 2 in 5 women in Texas and 1 in 5 men in Texas have been sexual assaulted. And so, as often, like Deja said, as often as we can get out and share information, we can. Michael Dickens was a part of a panel discussion we had not too long ago. How we're going to take information into the predominant African American community. So back in the old days, there was this Western called "Have Gun Will Travel," and so our motto is kind of like "Have Information Will Travel." And so as often as we can provide information and where we need to go to disseminate that is what we've signed up to do.
Yeah, and thank you for talking about the Denim Day. That was where I was going to go next. So thank you for that, and all of the work that's done for awareness. We mentioned men being victims as well. Are there any specific resources that are specific toward for men?
The services that we offer to women, we also offer to men. And so if a man
Same
is
at our
being,
agency.
yeah. So we talk about it from the perspective of the male being the perpetrator and the woman being the victim, because that's a higher percentage of the cases. But the reality is men can be sexually assaulted and abused as well. And so we provide those same services. Of course, when it comes to sheltering, it's important for us to have partnerships within the community. And so we would not shelter a male victim with the women and children. So we have arrangements with some of the local hotels to provide that type of service to our male clients.
I will say, as far as, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
As far as CAC victimizations, just to like challenge the stereotype, we actually see about 50% of sexual abuse victims being male and female. So we don't have a higher female victimization. It's actually right down the middle. And this is for children in specific.
TASA, the Texas Association Against Sexual Assault, they have the Texas Men Speak that people can look into that talks about how men can join the movement of sexual helping stop sexual violence, and how men are also victims of sexual violence.
All right, well, is there anything else that anyone would like to add that maybe we didn't haven't touched on yet, that maybe you want to make sure you get out there about your specific organization?
I can add something about Cook County, and I think Denton County might have this resource available too at the DA's office. But a lot of times we can do protective orders for people, and I know in Cook County, at least, a lot of times it starts at Abigail's Arms, and they'll make contact with the DA's office so that we can do a protective order. But at least in Cook County, people can actually just show up at the courthouse, and usually they start asking questions to somebody. I don't really know who, but they end up in the victim assistance coordinator's office, and she can sit down with them, and she kind of screens to see whether or not it's somebody who needs a protective order. And we've had people literally walk in off the street that had been, in a sexually abusive relationship, and they didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to get out. Maybe they had spoken to law enforcement a day or two before, but they still didn't really know what to do. And they, we can get that process started sometimes before an investigation is finished, before a case is getting indicted. So that's something that can be there. If there is that sort of violence, then that can make victims feel more comfortable, obviously, if that person is prohibited from being around them or contacting them. And then also on the same thing is that once a case is indicted, or once the person has been arrested and charged, we can do bond conditions to make it where that person can't be around the victim or the victim's family or the victim's workplace, or have no contact with the victim. So that's something else that we do that in Cook County pretty regularly. I think if Michael might be able to speak to that, or one of you guys might know for Denton County, but I think it's probably similar in Denton and in most places in Texas.
Yeah, the Denton County DA's office has a unit that handles protective orders. There are literally people there in the DA's office that is basically their whole job, is to handle protective orders. And a lot of offenses now, the sexual offenses now have lifetime protective orders. So something that's a fairly new thing in the law. Very powerful when a victim can receive a protective order that is literally never going to end. And that is a very good resource that is something that the DA's office offers, and there's no cost to the victim either when they go through the DA's office.
That's really good information.
Yeah. Well, is there any additional information that you would like to make sure, or maybe a piece of advice for a college student that might be, kind of maybe in this situation? Just any kind of piece of advice that anyone would like to share?
Well, no, go ahead, Lindsay.
Go ahead, Lindsay.
I was gonna jump back to like unique services or stuff that people may not know readily.
Yes.
But I know here at Cook County, we do have the ability to do chronic SANEs on site at our Child Advocacy Center. That's not something that's offered everywhere, but we are fortunate to have availability to do that. So if it does happen over 5 days, the child can come in a comfortable setting and be seen by sane nurse examiner on site. So it's sometimes a lot less pressure than having to go through the ER and get checked out and do all of
Right.
that before seeing the sane nurse examiner. And that's been a really useful tool for our families here in Cook County. And then something else that sexual assault victims, especially in children's cases, might not understand is when they come through a CAC, they're getting involved with a multidisciplinary team. And that's just a word that means like all of their parties put together. So it could be law enforcement, medical, mental health. And the CAC kind of facilitates that model to ensure that these cases are moving readily, that they're not becoming stagnant, and that these families and their cases are getting reviewed often to make sure that they're getting the most accurate and best servicing possible. So it really helps with keeping up with when is it getting filed, what are the court dates, when are those changing, how long were they in mental health servicing. So we really try to keep a handle and a pulse on all of those cases and make sure they're getting everything that they need.
I think I would like to add to the college student. It may be about now that they are figuring out what happened to them earlier was not okay. So to go back to what Michael and Eric said about there's never really a statute, one person's voice carries a lot of weight. I do think that's a time that they may step up for themselves, and so have courage to do that.
Yeah, I would echo that same thing. I mean, we've had cases, not just sexual assault cases, but also family violence cases where there had been abuse going on for years, and nobody ever made a report. Nobody ever called the police, and they came forward after, finally reaching that point, after, all the questions that every law enforcement officer, and I'm probably going to ask them too, did you take any pictures? Did you tell anybody? Did you send any text messages? Did you have anything? The answer before to all those questions has been no. And then, but really, if it's one person that has that story and that voice, that's enough. And there are cases that have been convicted on that alone. So there's not ever a time that's too late. Realistically, I guess the statute of limitations could run on some of these, but chances are there's not going to be an issue with this statute of limitations. It's difficult for it to be too long, and I would say that come forward and confide in somebody that you trust and go talk to the police.
One thing that I will, one thing that I would point out, even if theoretically the statute of limitations has run out, that victim that was abused many years ago, there may still be something that can be done about that in some way. Perhaps in the trial that is taking place now of a recent victim, upon conviction, that victim from many years ago may very well be testifying in the punishment hearing in that trial. Or there may be some other time during the trial that is appropriate for that victim to testify about what the perpetrator did to them many years ago. So I just would encourage people to report the abuse, and that's the main thing that I would say. If you've been an abuse victim, you need to make your voice known.
Can I add something about North Central Texas College, Beth?
Yes, yes.
I want
please.
to say that once the case is finished and the trial is finished and everything is done, and it may be 10 years down the road, we've actually had students come and talk individually to instructors and say, because of the stress of maybe even nursing school, it's kind of coming back again. NCTC does have a CARES program where we can advance those students who may not. I know that, and we've reached out to Abigail's Arms also, but we have places and other people to talk to. If the instructor isn't comfortable talking to them or even know what to do or how to handle it, they can escalate them to CARES, which allows them to talk to a counselor and just helps in the all around getting them through college. But that's after everything is done, not during the actual going through. But sometimes stress brings out reactions again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Diane. Yes. And that's it. Thank you, everybody, for spending your evening here. And I think we can all agree that you know, if you're going through this, if you've been through this, there's a lot of support. There's a lot of support, and there's people that are going to help you, walk you through, and be there every step of the way. So, you know, I just really encourage, you know, like Diane said, we have CARES at NCTC, and we are close with all of these different organizations and can help with different resources and give you the support that you need. And we also have our new Lion Care that helps with mental health services. I want to thank Sarah for being my backup in case anything happened. And again, I want to thank all of you panelists for spending some of your time and letting, you know, being an advocate and being a support system for anyone that is a survivor of a sexual assault. I know I learned a lot of different resources and different information. I'm sure that everyone else did. So again, thank you all for your time, and I think we are done.
Real quick, I do want to re-emphasize that if you are a student for NCTC and you need help, reach out to the CARES team. And there's also our Lion Care that we've started up this semester. And you can reach that through nctc.edu/lioncare.html. That is an awesome resource for our students to be able to reach out to get help medically, mentally, physically. So make sure to access that resource if you feel like you need it. And thank you all so much. Have a great night and stay safe.